classrooms. And today we're going to talk about the accessible materials and how to make that happen. I'd like to welcome back Laura Gear with, she's from the Francis Howell School District. She's a special educator with a specialty in instruction for the visually impaired. My name is Eileen Belton, and I'm with Missouri Assistive Technology. Today we're going to go through 4 basic topics for online resources. The first will be Google Docs, the basics of Word accessibility. We'll go over Duxbury and accessible math handouts. And let's start with Google Docs. I'm going to switch sharing my screen here to a different setup, and that's going to be Google Docs. And can you all see that? You can just put a note in the chat if you can see that. Great. All right. And for our presentation today, we welcome questions, but we'd like them at the end. So feel free to write any questions as they come to your mind in the chat box, and Chris will be reading through them for us at the end. Now, Google Docs has recently upgraded their product, and they've made it more accessible than it used to be. And so our goal today is to share with you the tips that will make your Google Docs accessible for a student that uses assistive technology like a screen reader or a Braille device. And so we'll walk through those pieces for you in a demonstration. We'll also show you an add-on called Grackle Docs that might be an option that you might consider for purchase. With Google Docs, the first thing you'll want to know is there's 4 basic things actually for making Google Docs accessible. The first is making sure that you've turned on the accessibility settings for the document that you've created. So you would go through the Tool tab down to the accessibility settings. And here you have some options to select to enable the assistive technologies to work more smoothly. So it's going to support the screen reader, Braille devices, and also magnification software. And when you click on that, you'll see that it opens up a new tab over here called Accessibility. This tab offers some shortcuts for the keyboard navigation. And so you don't necessarily need to use that for making your content accessible, but that's what that tab is about, is for the reader to go back and reference the shortcuts. So that's the first tip. The second tip is that you will want to use the built-in tools in Google Docs to make your document accessible. The first thing that Google Docs likes is that it have a title. And so your title field is up here. It'll automatically grab the first line of content that you have, like it did for this demonstration. And so for this, I'm just going to delete the number 4, and I'll accept that as the title, Tips on Accessible Google Docs. And so that begins to develop structure for your document. The other thing is that you'll want to add headings in your content. So headings will nestle together, so it's going to be based on the different topics that are in your document. Here, my structure is that I have 4 tips on accessible Google Docs, and I have them itemized tip 1, tip 2, and tip 3. So those are natural heading options. The main one will be heading 1, and so that's the 4 tips. So you would go up to your toolbar and either select it through the tab, under Formats and Paragraph, and select heading 1. And I've already got it selected, but you go ahead and you would apply that. You could also grab the heading in this shortcut toolbar right here as well. And so let's do that on the next one. So this second level of headings, since I have now 4 subheadings nestled underneath that main topic, they'll become heading number 2s. So we'll select that and apply it. What I want to show you is that there are 6 natural headings in Google Docs as there are for other documentation options like Microsoft Word. And typically in a document, you're not going to use all of them. You may only have, you will only have one header that's a number 1, but you may have multiple heading 2s, and you might have a couple of heading 3s. But that's typical for a document. You don't usually have that much more. So in this document, I'm going to show you how that gets applied. In the organizational chart, the document outline is automatically shown up here. And you can see that it's starting to say there's 4 tips on accessible documents. There's tip number 1 mentioned, tip number 2. And it's put over here in the organization because I've designated those as headings. I've also created a heading number 3 because under tip number 2, we have several different important points to cover. So I determined that that would be a heading 3 option. And I've gone ahead and already identified those as heading number 3s. So you'll want to make sure that you use your proper heading setup. You'll also want to make sure that if you're creating lists of information, much like a grocery list or a list of instructions to follow or assignments, that they be noted as a numbered item or a bulleted item. So that way that the screen reader will pick up that it is a list. And I've already indicated that. I've already made that selection. You can see that here because it's highlighted as a blue under the bulleted list on the toolbar. The difference would be if you didn't have it noted, then it would just read as a separate item. So the benefit of having all of these different things like headings and lists is it allows the screen reader, or if somebody's using shortcuts on the keyboard, to navigate to these different sections. So the structure helps support the reading effectiveness of those devices. You also want to consider for like the screen reader, it does read space and it does read blanks. And so when you want to align text, like on the toolbar, you have an option to do left justified, center, or right justified. We recommend that you choose the left justified because it does reduce the number of spaces between the words. When you're inserting items, there's 3 types of things that might be inserted. One of them is an image. You'll want to make sure that you add alt text to the image. And that way that the screen reader, when it comes across an image, it does announce that there's an image, but it will also then read what that image is. Otherwise, it serves no purpose for the reader using that assistive technology. So you can insert it through the toolbar tab, or also in the shortcut menu right here, there's a place to do that. So let's walk through a process like that. I'm going to insert from the computer. You can grab it from anywhere that you have your image saved. And then you're going to either right click once and go to alt text, or you could also use the shortcut keys, which is Control, Alt, and Y, and it will pop up the alt text box. And here you can give it a quick title, toolbar. And then a description. And when you create a description for your image, you'll want it to be meaningful text so that it explains why you chose that image in that and inserted it in that particular place. So you would just give that some consideration. Probably wouldn't be more than 2 sentences to be able to describe that adequately. For this demonstration, I'm going to do something very short. Image or tool options. When I hit OK, now it is stored in that image. The other thing about image and the screen reader is if you get an option here of where to place the image in your document. And we recommend it be on the inline option, which is natural inline to be read by a screen reader. So that's for inserting an image. You want to make sure that you add alternative text. When you insert a link, it also needs to be connected to text. It lets the screen reader know, announce where the website is taking the individual to. So I have an example here already. I'm going to use our website. So I'm going to cut that and I'll insert that in a minute. And so there's two ways you can do that. You can go ahead and just insert a website. You can insert the link option and it pops up a box and you can type in your link text right here in the top portion and put your link here in the bottom portion. You can also, if you've already started typing out the meaningful text of where your link is taking them, just highlight that and then click link, and it automatically is already in the proper spot for link text. And then you can. This is really helpful for website names that are really long and have lots of characters and lots of letters that make no sense and not easy to remember, because the screen reader will read out that whole line of the website if it doesn't have this link text. So now what the screen reader will hear is Missouri's Agency for All Things Assistive Technology. Another thing that you might insert with Google Docs is a table. And currently, I wasn't able to find a way to make it accessible. We did a lot of practice and research. And so it's really not, at this point, Google hasn't set it up to be, there be options to make tables accessible. So we recommend that you go ahead and use other file formats like Word or Excel to share that file with the students. Okay, so those are all tip number 2. And I want to make sure that I have tip number 3 is a header. So I do have that already down as a heading number 2. So we're good to go with that. Tip number 3 has to do with low vision needs. So this may not be an individual using assistive technology, but they may need just an increase of font size, or maybe they have colorblind needs. So consider that. You want to make sure the contrast for the background and the words that you're selecting, if you like to work with color, just make sure that they're a good contrast, at least 4.5. And I've inserted this little chart, and it'll also be on the handout that we'll provide after the session today. That's a good visual reference to tell you what are examples of good and poor. Here I've selected on the top something in like an orange font, and we'll see in a second when I show you this add-on tool for checking accessibility, if that's a pass or a fail for a choice. When it comes to font size, and a font size for large print is good at 18 or 24 font, and literally that is what those letters are right now. That's the difference in the font size. If you have a student that is needing a font size of 28 point or larger, they might be considered as candidates for magnification software or maybe Braille education. And tip number 4 has to do with the add-on tool called Grackle Docs. This is a tool that you can try for a period of, I think it's 30 days before purchase. And that's how I practiced with it for today's session, and really had some high expectations for how this would help you create an accessible document. And so I'll talk about the results of that here before we conclude. But so how you would launch it is you would go through the add-on tab, and when you download it, it's going to be stored here, and you hit launch. And today I've already signed in once, but if you haven't, above the recheck box, you'll get a sign-in option to click on. You have to do that in order for it to connect to your account. But once you do that, like I said, it's good for the day if you go in and out of Google Docs. So this is Grackle Docs, and what it does is it has a 22-point inspection process for accessibility, and it either will tell you it's a fail or a pass. What I like about this is it uses an X to indicate fail, as well as the color red. So if somebody can't see that color, at least they can see an X. And then the pass and the fail is a check mark in green. I mean, the pass is a check mark. So you can scroll through here and it will pick a variety of topics. We're going to just kind of skim through this, but you can see here that it's already kind of picked up a few areas of concern. And so let's look at those. Let's start back at the very top where it says a document title is required. Here's one of the challenges I found with Grackle Docs. You saw me in the beginning of the demonstration actually add a title to this. So we know that there's one that exists. So Grackle Docs can sometimes not be 100% accurate with picking up stuff, but I would still click on it and see if there's anything else in that category that would be helpful to know about. And with this particular category, the title, there is something that I wanted to point out. So here you would click on the little edit box it gives you, and it produces a pop-up menu. And you can confirm that the title is in there. So we see that there, tips on accessible Google Docs. But you also can change the author. Like I probably don't want my email showing. So the language for the Google Docs. The screen reader actually can read in several different languages. And so if it knows what language you want it to read in, it will have the proper dialect. If it, like say, for example, if it's Spanish, Another thing is that Grackle Docs likes to support in Google landmarks. So for example, page numbers. This is just a warning, it's passed, but it gives you suggestions when you click on it that you might want to add a header and a footer and then page numbers. Now, here's where I left the color contrast that we know is probably a poor choice, but I wanted to see if the Grackle Docs picked it up, and it did. And so let's click on that fail message, and it allows us to locate it. If you're not in that section of Google Docs, you can click on the locate button and it finds it for us. It's already highlighted what's in the gray there. And now you can't fix the color piece here because it's on the toolbar, but we'll go ahead and manually do that. I'm going to change that to blue, and then let's hit recheck and see if it picks up that I've made that change. And if it has, it will tell us that we've passed, and it does. So in this case, we're good to go. There's also a piece that has a document structure outline that you can select here called document structure. And it gives you a chance to check your setup, like for the heading. So we know that the 4 tips on accessible Google Docs should be heading 1. And then the 4 tips should be heading number 2. So I see tip 1 there is marked correctly. Tip 2 is marked correctly. Tip 3 is also a header 2. And then all the way down to tip number 4 is also heading 2. So that's great. So, so I know that I've already done that work, and it's recognizing, it's picked that up that I've done that work. But if it hadn't, and there are times when I've done this practice that it hasn't recognized that I've already picked the proper heading. So for me, it's important that you use your own discretion. We've taught you the tips here that you need to know to create the proper structure to make it accessible. So depend on that versus depending on a tool like this to pick up those possible errors or fails on making it accessible. One other thing about Grackle Docs that makes this a popular tool is that if you are exporting a Google Doc into a PDF, any accessibility features that you have built into the document, it saves it as it exports into a PDF. And that really is valuable. And so if anything, if that's part of what you do for your work, this might be a tool worth looking into for purchase. So, and those are the main tips that I wanted to make at this point on making Google Docs accessible. I'm going to stop my portion of the presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Laura and let her share her information.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm going to share my screen. All right, move my, I'm gonna do that. All right. So the nice thing about Google Docs and Word documents are made accessible in very similar ways. And so some of the things that I'm going to go over here in a Word document will look very, very familiar, which actually is really nice in that Google Docs kind of mirrors what you would want to do in Word. And so very similarly, you want to make sure that you put in those headings, subheadings, you've put in a style. And so with Word, you are simply going to, you can either highlight it or just have your cursor, and I've already done this, and you can see it's fairly nice because up here in the window, in the ribbon, excuse me, it just gives you all these different headings. So usually your main title is going to be a heading 1, and then any main section headings would be, you know, heading 2, subsections would be heading 3, and then your paragraphs are just going to be normal. Now, some people are like, well, I don't want my, you know, heading 2 to look like what it looks like. Maybe I wanted it bold, or maybe I wanted it in a different font. And the really nice thing about that is then if you just go up here to heading 2 and right click, you can modify, and it'll bring up a nice box where you can change your font, you can make them bold. And then if you want that to be across every Word document that you create, like this is the way I want this heading, you can down here click new documents based on this template. And then it saves those changes that you made. It's also going to change any of those other heading 2s that are in your document. So that's, sometimes I get teachers are like, well, I don't like, you know, that's their big thing is visually they're wanting a certain look. And I'm like, just use the built-in headings, that will help you out. Same thing as Google Docs with lists. You want to make sure you use Word's the pre-formatted bullets and lists. Word a lot of times will like auto format that. If you do number 1 and then hit enter, it'll automatically give you a number 2. But you can also use your ribbon up here and choose, you know, different types of bullets or different types of, you know, numbering or lettering. This is especially useful like if you're creating a multiple choice document, a test or something. You want to make sure that you're using those lists and bullets. With images, if you want to insert an image, you again also want to make sure it's always in line. I usually insert my image and then just right click. You're going to hit edit alt text, and it's going to bring up a box for you. Same thing as Google Docs. You're going to put in a few sentences about what the picture is. I put, it's a street sign with multiple arrows and what the words were. You do not have to put it's a picture of or an image of in your description, because a screen reader is going to tell the reader image. It's going to tell them that they've hit an image. The other thing is if it's just decorative, like you've just put in a smiley face for decoration, it has nothing to do with the actual content of the document, you can mark it as decorative, and then the screen reader knows that, hey, this wasn't important, this wasn't part of the content. You also do not have to alt text watermarks. You know, like maybe you have an insignia on the page or something that's a watermark. That does not have to be alt text. Tables are, I know we mentioned in Google Docs they don't format as well. They do format in Word. You just have to make sure you actually insert it as a table. I usually just use the little insert tab up at the top, and you're going to choose table, and then you can make the table, you know, as big as you want. I have inserted just a little table, like the cost of different fruit. What you do want to do for a screen reader is repeat your header. This way, as they're navigating through the table, it's going to tell them what column that they're in. And so if you just highlight your top row and right click and go to table properties, what you're going to want to click is this little one here that says repeat as header row at the top of each page. And that's going to alert that reader. It's going to basically repeat that header for them as they navigate through that table. Hyperlinks or websites, very similar to Google Docs. I usually just, you're going to right click and you can insert a link. You're going to put what text you want and then the web address. Word does recommend that you copy paste the web address, especially because some of those web addresses are like lots and lots of characters. So you're going to insert that. And you want to make sure that you use words that describe the website or the title of the website. Don't use click here or click right here, because that doesn't give the reader any information about where they're going in their document. So as you can see, it's very, very similar to Google Docs, those same kind of formatting. So a little bit of extra information that I found just in working with students that have vision impairments that are using a screen reader or a refreshable Braille device. If you're trying to visually arrange things on a page, don't use tab or space. Don't space to make a column. Like actually insert a table or use a bulleted list. If you want to get to the top of the next page, like with multiple choice, say, oh, this whole question and answer is not going to fit on this page, so I'm going to move the whole question to the next page. Don't just hit enter, 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 enter to move it. Go ahead and insert an actual page break, because otherwise that screen reader is going to read like blank line, blank line, blank line every time as they're going through that. Whereas if you insert a page break, they can easily just navigate to that page. And if you don't know how to do that, that's right up here on your insert tab. You can insert page break, and then it'll start on the next tab. So those are just some tips for Word. Some other things I wanted to share with you is, so a lot of people that are working with Braille use a program called Duxbury. And this is a software that you purchase for your computer that is going to kind of auto-translate your document into Braille, and then it will send it to your embosser to emboss into hard copy Braille. Duxbury has a free download called Swift, and it's fantastic. And so once you've downloaded Swift, you will have up here in your tabs, you will have an actual Braille tab. And if you click on that Braille tab, it's going to prompt you to choose your template. And I'm going to, because I'm going to show you some math later, I'm going to actually choose UEB, which is the current Braille code used in the United States, and I'm going to, with Nemeth. So if you're using math, you would choose Nemeth. If there's no math in it, you would just choose UEB, but I'm going to choose math. And you can see it's going to give me this nice ribbon up here at the top for different Braille formatting, inserting different things. The nice thing is if you've already formatted your Word document with your headings, Swift is going to still pick that up as like a heading 3, as a normal, and that's going to translate straight into Duxbury. So you don't have to go into that Duxbury program and insert all those styles. Swift will take care of that. Now, if it's not the way that you want it, you can go in and change and say, oh, I'm going to change this to a list, or I just want to do an indent at 1 and a run over at 2. Like, you can tell it what you want. But the nice thing is if a teacher creates a document and formats it, you should be able to very easily send that into Duxbury. So I will show you very quickly. You can click the open in DBT. I'm going to select the whole document first, only because I haven't saved it. If you have a saved document, it'll let you do the document. But I'm going to hit selection. And then I think I have to click over to Duxbury so you guys can see it. Hopefully you can see Duxbury now. And you can see this is what Duxbury looks like once it's been all formatted. And you can see it saved that heading centered. Heading 2 is a cell 5. A heading 3 is a cell 7. And then those paragraphs are body text. And then all I have to do in Duxbury is a quick hotkey of Control T translates, and you can see that it's going to translate that straight into Braille. And then I can very easily send this to my embosser and have it embossed. So if you are using Duxbury and you are not using Swift, I highly, highly recommend it. And then we also try to train our regular ed teachers, if you're a regular ed teacher, to go ahead and format those Word documents with those headings and things, so that then when they're sent to us to be put into Braille, we are not having to go back and format all of that. All right, let me go back to Word. And share. Okay. The other program that we use that's super helpful for math is a download called MathType. It's, I think right now, about $69.99 is probably the cost. So it's not a free program. They do have like a free trial. And what this does, it allows you to enter math easily into a Word document. And this is great for just math, worksheets or whatever that you're doing. But the really nice thing about it is it's going to insert it into what's called Math, I think it's Math XL or ML, I forget the actual, I think it's Max XL format, which then Duxbury picks up as math. If you just type into, like if I just typed in 7 and then like I use an X for times 4, when I translate that in Duxbury, it's going to put the letter X. It's not going to see that that's a math code unless I go up into Swift and tell it it's a math code, which you can do, but it takes a lot more work. So for MathType, once again you download it, it gives you a tab, and then it gives you all of this stuff that you can do, and you hit inline. I think I have to go in and share this so that you can see it. So it gives you this nice little box to insert math. So for example, like if I wanted to do some fractions, I find this little fraction guy and I can choose what kind of fraction I can even put. I can put things under radicals. You can do all kinds of crazy math. And then I'm going to say I want 3/4. And then I can go up here and choose, divided by, and then maybe I want another fraction. And so I'm going to put 4/5. And then you can actually still use your keyboard for equal and plus. But once you do that, you can update your document. And it hasn't shown up. It's there, but it's blinking. Hold on. Okay. So what it does is that it will insert that math problem then directly into your Word document. And when you send that over into Duxbury, it will turn it straight into math. For some reason, it's being weird. And I know that it's there because I'm getting this weird blinky cursor. Sometimes it's a little fussy, but it's there. It's just for some reason not showing up. But I highly recommend MathType. We, as a district, I'm in the Francis Howell district, and we researched lots of different ways to try to do math for Braille. And none of them are super easy, but we have found that MathType helps a whole lot. You also, if you download Swift, can go in and tell it this is math. And so like you can, I gotta find it, but you basically can, here it is. So like you can start a math and then enter math and end your math. And if you know anything about Braille, what it then does in Duxbury is gives you that indicator, the math indicator that you're switching into math code, and then it does the math, and then it'll give an end, a terminating math indicator. So MathType is highly recommended, even if you're just creating Word documents as worksheets, just to have the correct symbols. It's really nice too, if you create the nice worksheet, you can, students that need large print or you can send it to maybe an iPad or a device, or use Zoom text, and then it's bigger. Equatio also has some good math formatting. You can actually scan and grab. I don't use Equatio nearly as much as we use the math type, mainly because I'm switching mainly into Braille. But I highly recommend math type and highly recommend Swift. If you are using Duxbury and haven't downloaded Swift, you are missing out because it makes it so much easier.